What's going on, everybody? How y'all doing? This is a mic check. Not sure if I'm gonna actually get anything started tonight. I got something planned. Title is kind of right there on the screen and whatnot. But I gotta make sure everything is working. I have had all kind of difficulties, and so I'm just trying to do a mic check right now, and we're gonna get around to seeing whether or not everything is actually live. What's going on? How y'all doing? We're gonna find out. If this is live. Not too sure. Not necessarily looking good already. And of course the dog wants to go off. Y'all can't see this, right? Trying to see now. We're going to find out if we actually live. Okay, we are actually live. That's great. So, not only are we live, we do have sound. That's another good thing. Let's see what's going on. I am going to get something started now that I know it's live. Once I make sure. Okay. So we got sound. Got a question for you in the chat. Man, I know you can't necessarily answer this right now. You don't know what I'm talking about. But we going from Egypt to Baghdad. We're going to be talking about the African secret that got a brother named al-Hallaj executed. If you're familiar with the field of study, then you might have heard this phrase, fana al-Haqq. And that's what we're going to be talking about. But again, like I said, I do want to make sure everything is working exactly how it's supposed to. I know we got sound. If you're falling in right now, stop scrolling. Check out the actual. Can you hear the music? What's going on? Let's see whether or not anything and everything is working. All right, so the music is live. We're gonna wait a couple of more minutes to see make sure everything else is working. And any other interruptions I'm not gonna jump on. We're talking about the black roots of a heresy. Why they beheaded al-Hallaj for an ancient Kemetic idea. We're talking about Islam, we're talking about ancient Egypt, we're talking about African spirituality. They killed this man just for saying, I am God. Like, now we sit in a much more comfortable position in today's world. In today's society, we can roll off the biblical passage. It says, hey, hold up now. Don't start tripping on me. The Bible says I am God. That ain't me though. I'm just repeating what I heard. But when this brother discovered and recognized and realized that he had the God in him, they said, this is too much truth for the people. If you think you're going to teach this to the people, you're going to free their mind. You're going to have to get rid of you. Those in power always have an issue with those without the power discovering their own self-power. So I want you to remember a name. I I want you to remember this name. Let me see if I can put it on the screen. Mansur al-Hallaj. That's his name. Mansur al-Hallaj. But let me see. So I'm going to pause the music for a moment. I might bring it back a little bit later. But we're talking about Mansur al-Hallaj. That's his name. So now that you got it on the screen, like you may not know, like well, what is he saying? How do you spell that? Well, now you got it on the screen so you can see how it's spelled. Mansur al-Hallaj. But I will try to drop the names and some links into the chat. So if you happen to come along while I'm live and you in the chat, feel free to make a response. Okay, so here we go. Now, I would really like to know if, as I'm going through this presentation tonight, if you think what I'm saying is blasphemy, then let me know. But I'm going to need you to remember that name, Mansur al-Hallaj. Now, we're going to go back in time a little bit. We're going to go back to 922 Common Era. We're going to a city named Baghdad. Now, in this city, Mansur al-Hallaj was arrested, tortured for nearly a decade. And then they went further. Y'all heard about Marie Antoinette, let them eat cake? It wasn't the first head chop. Mansur al-Hallaj was beheaded. His body was burned and his ashes were scattered in the Tigris River. You know, that's the same type of thing that they did to our African ancestors. So why did they do this to this man? What was this crime so terrible it demanded such an erasure? So in other words, we're going to come back to. There were 3 words that got his head chopped off. Now, I should have put this one on the screen, and I didn't. So, apologies for me. Ana al-Haqq. Let me see if I can get that onto the screen. Give myself another. What's this? I need a banner. Create a banner. Ana al-Haqq. So y'all see that word right about there. Y'all see that word? Ana al-Haqq, or that phrase? That's the phrase that got Mansur's head chopped off. Ana al-Haqq. Now, what does it mean, you might ask? It means I am the truth. It means I am the real. Same way we kind of use that expression in hip hop today. Now, the dominant power circles, the orthodoxy, they called the statement in and of itself blasphemy. And they called teaching this statement to the people the ultimate blasphemy. But what if I told you that Ana al-Haqq wasn't, even if we admit, or not admit's the wrong word, even if we agree that it was a heresy, I submit to you that it wasn't a heresy born in the Middle East. What if it was the echo of a spiritual truth spoken in the black land of Kemet, thousands of years before the Prophet Muhammad of 1400 years ago, peace be upon him, was on the scene? thousands of years before the man they call Yeshua was on the scene, and before Musa was the star of the show. Today we're connecting the dots. Tonight we're connecting the dots. The dots from the executioner's blocks, from Baghdad to the pyramids of Upper Kemet. So let me set the stage, let me set the scene for you. Al-Hajj, Mansur al-Hallaj, he wasn't some fringe figure. He wasn't a fanatic. Uh, he wasn't like the pseudo. This was not like he wasn't the QAnon person of his day. He was a renowned Sufi master. He was a teacher and a pilgrim. Now, some might say, why are you talking about this? This Islam ain't got nothing to do with black people. Hold up. Now, I will at least say this. Oh, let me ask it this way. Is there any gray area about his racial identity? I'll be the first to admit most depictions show him as a pale Arab or a pale Persian. But we're going to have to remember some context, and we're going to have to get a little bit more historically astute. Because the same way they depict these pale Arabs of Islamic origins is the way they depict these pale Middle Easterners of other Abrahamic faiths. So if we could have a movement of awareness that Jesus was not the pale oriented individual, then we can have a movement of awareness that those original Arabs were not of the pale persuasion. But no doubt, Mansur al-Hallaj was indeed a product of the Islamic world. But the Islamic world has always been one of mixture, where identities were often blended, where African ancestry was common, but also systematically erased from the historical record. Now, so allow me to soapbox for a moment. Because the historical reality about Mansur al-Hallaj. Al-Hallaj was born around 858 Common Era in a province of present-day southern Iran. The province is called Fars, Fars. It was an Arabized town called al-Baida. His grandfather was a Zoroastrian, might surprise you to know. His father was a cotton carter who had converted to Islam. Whole lot of interesting buzzwords in that identity. Now, again, as I said, is there a gray area about his racial persuasion? Absolutely. But would you find it interesting to know that this Fars province in southern Iran is a region that historically had a significant Afro-Iranian population going far back into antiquity? Ancient historians like Herodotus and Strabo document Black populations lived throughout Persia and Mesopotamia centuries before Islam, and they remain there. And that Arabized town, al-Baid, that Arabized town Let me put that on the screen. Let me put that on the screen. Where's my screen at? Here we go. Here we go. Would you find it interesting that Arabized only means multiplicity of ethnicity? Multiple ethnic groups blending together. That's what Arabized means. Now, the historical record tells us that al-Hallaj became so Arabized that he even lost his quote unquote Persian language. Lost it completely. Sound familiar? This is the same pattern of ethnic erasure we see throughout Islamic history, throughout global North history. Same games played with Prophet Muhammad's own complexion, peace be upon him. Translating Arabic words to make brown-skinned and black-skinned figures appear European. Now I'll have a few scholars that I'm going to mention and, drop them in the chat so that you can do some research if you so desire. Because despite these efforts of erasure, here's what cannot be deleted. We can have the arguments, pro and con, in favor of and against. We can debate if he was a black man or not. But the ideas that al-Hallaj, that Mansur al-Hallaj promoted and promulgated, ain't a whole lot of debate on that part of it. So whether al-Hallaj's skin was dark as the Nile Valley night or light as a cloud from some Persian mixing, the spiritual lineage that al-Hajj belongs to is one that flows directly from Black Egypt, from Kemet. Now, al-Hallaj studied in Kemet. He drank from the well of Dul al-Nun. Now, if you're not sure who Dul al-Nun is, I have another video. I do have another video. We talked about Dul al-Nun. Dul al-Nun was an Egyptian born, but not just anywhere in Egypt. He was born in Upper Kemet. Now, again, if you're not familiar, you may think Upper is up here, but in Egypt, in Kemet, Upper is down here. So he was born in the southern area of the country. Down there where Aswan is, that's Nubia territory. That's quite remarkably black. So al-Hallaj comes from the spiritual lineage of Dul al-Nun al-Misri. And that man was unquestionably a black Cometian, a black Egyptian from Aswan. So the knowledge that Dul al-Nun presented is the knowledge that Mansur al-Hallaj absorbed. That is African knowledge, African spirituality, a spiritual download that Mansur received, and it propelled him to speak his truth, his black African truth. But for all those black facts, now the key isn't necessarily his personal phenotype. It is important. But the source of his ideas, it is a source that flows directly from Black Kemet. Now, Mansur traveled widely, and this is critical. Al-Hallaj, Mansur al-Hallaj, he traveled widely, but he definitely traveled and studied in Kemet. He spent time there, he studied there, he was deeply influenced by the Egyptian Sufi school that was flourishing in the wake of its founder, that man I just told you about. The founder of the Egyptian school of Sufism was al-Nun al-Nur. So Mansur al-Hallaj's spiritual journey was marked by these profound encounters at sacred sources. in Kemet, the ultimate well, the ultimate water well for spirituality. Now, when Mansur began teaching that, and excuse me for these terms, it's just a different way of wording things so that you can wrap your head around it. But when he began teaching that the lover could become one with the beloved, when he began teaching that the seeker could annihilate his ego so completely that the only thing that remains is God. Well, the political authorities of the day they weren't about to have that. They lost their minds, like that snippet on the Public Enemy CD. Now, they actually said, we can't have this truth out there. Now, you ain't got to take my word for it. I'll give you a scholar's name. I like the name drop to help put the puzzle pieces together. So, one of the scholars that you can check out is Louis Massignon. Now, I do apologize if I'm pronouncing it wrong. I don't know French. I believe the dude is French. And I believe that's how it would be pronounced. Louis Massignon. Or perhaps in the American accent of it all, Louis Massignon. But I think Louis Massignon sounds better. He's probably the world's foremost expert on al-Hallaj. I mean, Massignon spent his own life studying Hallaj. He called al-Hallaj's case the central drama of Sufism, a clash between mystical union and religious law, doctrine. But here's what Massignon and so many others, what they often overlook. The source of this idea of union with the divine. Because, ladies and gentlemen, it did not spring from the desert sands of Arabia. It sprung from the nourishing waters of Hapi. Now, if you're not sure what is Hapi, what is he talking about? Well, most of us, the world is more familiar with the Greek term the Nile, the River Nile. But again, so what I'm saying is that which was taught by Mansur al-Hallaj literally came from the nourishing waters of the Nile. So to understand al-Hallaj, you have to go back to the man we talked about in the last video, that black Egyptian, that father of Sufi doctrine, Jew al-Nun al-Misri. Now, just as a reminder, and I'll have a link to the other video where I go much further into that. But Jew al-Nun was born near Aswan in the heart of Black Africa, in the heart of Black Kemet. He was the one who first systematically taught the concepts of marifa. What is marifa? Divine Gnostic knowledge. He was the one who first taught the concept of fana. What is fana? The annihilation of the self into God. You become one with God. So your own individual personality, personage is deleted. So here's the lineage that we're talking about. The ideas born in Aswan, in the heart of Jew al-Nun territory, but not just geographically. I mean, in the heart of Jew al-Nun. These ideas reach their most radical and pure conclusion in the heart of al-Hallaj in Baghdad. Yes, that African seed blossomed in the Islamic Empire, and the empire cut the flower down, as empires always try to do. Now, Al-Hallaj was drinking from a well that Jew al-Nun had already dug. And I do mean, let's put these pieces together from a well. This is a metaphor. Y'all remember how Musa was found, or how Musa found himself at the water well? So did Mansur al-Hallaj. But we're going to go further back than that, because here's the real connection. Like I said, Ana al-Haqq is that's the phrase that got him into trouble. But that ain't the first utterance of that phrase. Would you be interested? Have you ever heard this? Inik patah. Have you ever heard Inik Asar? Inik Asar. This is the I am of the pharaohs. This is the I am written in stone on the walls. So that's why I said we're going to go further back. Because before Islam, before Christianity, before Hebrew, Israelite, Israelism, be it the black or the white persuasion. Make sure my mic is still hot. We have Nile Valley civilization. So when you go into the deepest, oldest parts of the Egyptian pyramids, of the Kemetic pyramids, what you will find, you'll find something that they like to call the pyramid texts. These are the oldest religious texts in the world. And in them, the deceased, the king, the pharaoh, the Insut Biti. The Insut Biti. Give you another word. The Insut Biti. Y'all see that word right there on the screen. Can't show it to you. You see it in the bottom. Insut Biti. That's the pharaoh, the king of Upper and Lower Kemet. So in the pyramid text, what we come across, what we find is we find the pharaoh making declarations. We find the pharaoh praying. They called them utterances. Powerful divine declarations, almost like mantras. Now, ironically enough, these utterances eventually became scripture. But that's a jewel for you to think on. We can work on that another day. So as we comb through the pyramid texts, and if you get a chance to go to Kemet, as you walk through the museums and the pyramids, what you will encounter on the walls is Inik Atum, Inik Asar, Inik Ptah. I am Atum. I am the creator God. I am Asar. I am the great one, son of the great one. Now, it's metaphor, but it's so much more. It's ritual, but it's so much more. It's spiritual reality. The king, through his initiation and his journey, becomes one with the divine, becomes the divine. He realizes his essential unity with the source of all things. Now, that's from the pyramid text. Now, if you wanna do some more research, feel free. Check out this British Egyptologist R.T. Rundle Clark. Now, his work, Myth and Symbol in Ancient Egypt. explains that the pharaoh was the embodiment of the god, Heru, Ausar, and I'm getting ahead of myself. The Insubiti, the pharaoh, the king, was the embodiment of the god Heru. Now, in death, he transforms and he becomes Asar, merging with the divine principle, resurrection, reincarnation. Make sure, let me come on, get back on the main screen. Okay, where we go. And make sure. All right. Shout out to anybody. This is welcome to the channel if you're new here. I forget to give my little station identifications. But thank you for showing up. Thank you for paying attention and listening. Hit the like button, share, subscribe, drop a comment on the page, drop a comment in the chat. But we talk about what the British Egyptologist R.T. Rundle Clark said. Now, again, his work was Myth and Symbol in Ancient Egypt. And he explained that the pharaoh was the embodiment of the god Heru. And in death, he becomes Asar. So when we hear Inik, when we see on the walls, when we read in the pyramid text, Inik Asar. This is the I am utterance, the I am formula, spiritual ritual. It is the core of the scriptural passages. So what we see as time goes on, as at the very beginning, in the earliest stages, the idea was that only the leader can become one with God. But as time goes on, they began to realize it's not just the leader. So they began to spread this message to other people. So it went from just the leader to the leader and all of the important people of the society, what we might call the nobles. And so then when you get to the coffin texts, that's what you end up seeing. It wasn't just Pharaoh. It was all the people in the Pharaoh's court. And then time marches on and people start to realize, wait a minute, if the Pharaoh can become one, if the nobles can become one with the deity, we all can become one with the deity. And so, ladies and gentlemen, what you have is what they call the book of coming forth by day. And sometimes people say the book of coming forth by day and by night. Now, in that writing, in that stage of time, the teaching and the hope, the aspiration was we all could go forth by day. We all can go forth by night. And when you go forth, you become one with the deity, one with the Neteru. So, what does all of this have to do with the brother al-Haqq? I'm sorry, the brother al-Hallaj, Mansur al-Hallaj. Well, if we go back to this al-Haqq statement, let it be clear. Al-Haqq means truth, but it's deeper than that. It means unchanging reality. Now, I would submit to you that, put that on the screen for you. Al-Haqq equals Maat. Yeah, I said it. Al-Haqq equals Ma'at. So we're going to break this word down. In Arabic, al-Haqq is not just truth. It's not one and one. It's not like 2 + 2 = 4, always and forever. There's layers and meanings, just like with most words in any language's vocabulary. You have words with multiple definitions. Ah. So Al-Haqq means the real. It means ultimate. It means unchanging reality. It can also be said to mean the essential truth of the universe. And that's when it's like, wait a minute, this sounds familiar. The essential truth of the universe? Well, that's a direct parallel to the Kemetic concept of Ma'at. Ma'at wasn't just truth, it was justice, it was harmony, all at the same time. Now, the scholar Dr. Malana Karenga, if you're familiar with that brother, explains in his book, Ma'at, the Moral Ideal in Ancient Egypt. He explains that Ma'at was the fundamental divine order of the universe. You see that essential truth, fundamental order? Dr. Karenga says it was the cosmic harmony that held creation together. To live in Ma'at is to be in alignment with the very fabric of reality. If you are in that kind of an alignment, we're talking about annihilating the self, annihilating the ego, so that nothing remains except your one-to-one connection with God. So since we're making this connection, since we're putting these pieces of the puzzle together to give you a better view, let me also bring in a couple of other powerful voices, because Black scholars like Dr. Yosef Ben Yochanan, they've long since they showed us, they taught us that Islam's African roots are there for the viewing. You just have to know where to look. And when we examine this history, and when we examine the historical record, we see this lineage clearly. And not just him. Dr. Wesley Muhammad, in his work on the intersection of African spiritual systems, points out that this concept of divine immanence is a unifying thread. He notes that in these traditions, the goal is not just to worship God from afar, but to achieve a state of consciousness where one is in harmony with the divine. Ashe, Asheo. And when you are at one with the divine in Islam, that means you are entering the realms of Ma'at. So, al-Haqq, ana al-Haqq, can be understood as inik Ma'at. Inik Ma'at. That's the Kemetic phrase. Inik means I am. So Inik Ma'at means I am the unchanging cosmic order. I am the living embodiment of the ultimate reality. I am God. Now, let me slow down, because I know sound like ego talk. Y'all remember Steady B, ego tripping? I know that's what it sounds like. But again, to understand this concept, you're going to have to suspend your personal lens. You got to step outside that box, at least for a few minutes. Now, I know that might be challenging if you're not initiated into these types of things. If you're not initiated, I ain't saying go get initiated. I ain't saying don't. If you're not accustomed to this type of information, or another way for me to say it is, if you're too far down into the trenches of the Abrahamic tradition rabbit holes, how about you come on up for some air, please? Otherwise, yeah, it's going to sound like I'm just trying to big up myself when I say I am God. It's going to sound like anybody who says it is trying to beat their chests and calling themselves, it's blasphemy, I tell you. But I promise you, with the proper perspective, you'll begin to understand that's not what's going on. But just so I can put you in familiar territory. Because even your Abrahamic text, the Bible, and if you're of the Hebrew persuasion, the Torah, if you dance yourself on down to that section called Psalms, and you look up 82:6, you're going to see that the Psalms, or the speaker in the Psalms, now y'all can have at it as to whether or not the speaker in the Psalms is a songwriter, is God, is Jesus, or whoever. But it's undeniable that the words on the page at Psalm 82, section 6, all are God's. Let me put that onto the screen. Psalm 82, 6. That ain't all it says. Psalm 82, 6. All are God's. Now, if I spelled that, I think that may supposed to be have an S on there. My apologies. If I remember correctly, it says all are God's and children of the Most High. Yet ye will die as men and princes do. Something like that. But it's telling you right there that you are a God. That ain't ego. That's your Bible. More importantly, that's African spirituality. So that's what they call continuity of culture. That's what they call spiritual lineage. The chain remains unbroken. So let's just slow it down as we proceed. It's not ego screaming, I am God. It's actually, in effect, it's actually the absence of ego, where the individual self has been erased. And only the consciousness of the divine remains. This is what al-Nun was teaching with fana. This is what al-Nun was teaching with fana. You can see it on the screen. And it's what the Kemetic priests practiced for millennia. The annihilation of self for the sole purpose of becoming one with the divine. So again, but why does this matter? Well, one reason it matters. All throughout history, what we see is the suppression of the African voice, the suppression of African culture, the suppression of African spirituality. So let's bring it all home. This African mystical voice that we're talking about. Why was al-Hallaj really killed? Well, would you find it interesting that Socrates, if he was real, if he existed, the storyline, the narrative of the plot is that Socrates went to Kemet, studied in the schools of Kemet, then returned home and said, I got to teach the people this new information. It's really going to help them. And he was killed for it. Because the powers that be said, we don't want that African knowledge, or at least we don't want it spread amongst the people. And lo and behold, centuries later, why was al-Hallaj really killed? That's the burning question for the journalist in you. Yes, on the surface, it was for blasphemy. On the surface, it was for blasphemy. But underneath, something else. Just like on the surface today, Trump wants to invade Nigeria to save some Christians. Some Christians. He ain't got no concern about the Christians in Palestine, or rather, I should say, the Palestinian Christians. And no, I'm not giving a shout out to Nicki Minaj for sticking her nose in the business she ain't got nothing to do with. But you got a surface rationale and you got the real truth underneath. And so, underneath the masquerade of Trump's concern for Nigerian Christians is his bloodlust for oil. So, the parallel here is underneath the charge of blasphemy for Mansur al-Hallaj was something else. Now, I'm not saying it was bloodlust for oil, but it was something heavy. This was a clash of paradigms. This was a clash of culture, clash of thinking. The orthodoxy knew they had everybody in the palm of their hand. And what Mansur al-Hallaj was teaching was going to free your mind and the rest would follow. So it was a clash of paradigms. And it's the same thing we see everywhere. Remember what happened in Kemet with Akhenaten. Here was a pharaoh, an Insubiti, a leader, the king, preaching a new revolution of a single worship-worthy deity. And he too taught that it's deeper than that. He too taught that the impetus of this new worshipness was becoming one with the supreme deity. He challenged the powerful priesthood of Amen. He upended the entire political and religious power structure. And though they could not get their hands on him the way they wanted to, once he passed on, once he transitioned and became one with Aten, the fallout was severe. After his death, they tried to erase him from history. So we're talking about African mysticism, the African mystical paradigm. It was born in Kemet. It taught immanence. It taught that the divine is within you and all throughout creation. Now, Europeans come along and say, that's animism. And they want to throw shots like animism is a bad thing. That's paganism. And they want to throw shots like paganism is a bad thing. Truth of the matter, paganism just means somebody else's religion. There is no inherent valid favoritism factors in that definition. Paganism simply means you are of a different religion. So to a Muslim, a Christian is a pagan, and vice versa. To a Christian, a Muslim is a pagan. All it means is your religion ain't my religion. It don't mean one is better than the other. Not by definition. Now, by connotation, by personal arrogance, ignorance, and hate, now that's another whole story together. But what the African mystical paradigm teaches is that you yourself can know God directly. You do not need the church. You do not need the mosque. You do not need the temple. You don't need your preacher. You don't need your pastor. You don't need your imam, because Allah talks to you directly. Because Jehovah talks to you directly. Because Yahweh talks to you directly. Because Ausar talks to you directly. So you can know God directly. You can become one with God without any interference, without any intercession. This is what Sufism is teaching. This is what al-Nun is teaching. Now, the rising Orthodox paradigm, heavily influenced by political power, heavily influenced by political greed, they wanted to teach transcendence. They wanted to teach that God is wholly, entirely, utterly separate and distinct and unique. That's the Abrahamic stuff. They claim that unity with the divine, they claim that unity with him. Shout out to what's up? Shout out to user. I can't get that name right. User JV8, JV8, K4, Emmett. I thought it was something for Kemet, but I'm not too sure. But shout out to you, brother or sister, whatever. I appreciate you showing up. What's up to you? Hope you stick around. But here we again. So the Abrahamic school of thought teaches that God teaches that he is distinct, unique, and separate. And it also goes further to say, when I say Abrahamic, I'm talking about the biblical people of Christianity. I'm talking about the Torah people of Judaism. I'm talking about the Islamic people or the Muslim people or the Quranic people of Islam. And they go further to say, if you claim unity with him, now allow me to digress a little bit. They go further to say that if you claim unity with her, and if that don't get you clutching the pearls, if you claim unity with it, to do that is blasphemy. You're challenging the entire power structure. Something got to give. But this is the very heart of why African spirituality has always been a target for philosophical and theological genocide. The powers that be have never wanted the masses to embrace their own personal direct link to, say it with me, God. And so Mansur al-Hallaj had to go. Can't have that. They pretty much did to him what the Europeans did at the Council of Nicaea. They gathered all of the world scholars, got them into the rooms behind closed doors, and they said, look, here is the official playbook. Now you are all welcome to tell us why you disagree. And everybody that stood up and spoke and said, nah, I disagree. Trinitarianism is not right. Off with their head. Only the Trinitarians walked out of that conference alive. Because the anti-Trinitarians were saying, no, you actually can get one with God. You don't actually need the intercessions. And they had to go. And Mansur al-Hallaj said, you don't need an intermediary. And Mansur had to go. But what I'm also trying to impress upon you is that al-Hallaj was standing in the lineage of the Black Egyptian, the Black Kemetic, the Black Sufi, Jew al-Nun, having drunk from the well of Kemet. He was a living reminder of that suppressed ancient truth. He was a threat because he recognized and realized, Ana al-Haqq, I am the truth. I am the God. I am Allah. Inik Maat. This was a threat. So they had to silence it. They didn't want to just kill the man. They wanted to. Their desire, their hopes and dreams was to kill the idea. Because when you realize that you are one with the divine, then you start second guessing a lot of teachings and a lot of practices and a lot of rules. Let's talk about biblical rules. Like, wait a minute. Do I really need to be tithing the pastor? If I got a direct connection with the Supreme Being, the Supreme Being can tell me where my tithing goes. Well, that ain't gonna go too well with the pastor community. But the fact remains, you can't kill the idea, especially when, see, what one of the things that our African ancestors in Kemet knew was people are going to try to cover up the truth. Let's put this ish in stone. Write it in stone. They can't do but so much with that. All they can do is try to deny it's there, but anybody wants to get on the airplane and go over there, you go see it written on the walls. So you can't kill an idea when it's written in stone on pyramids. And why? Because they knew it should be as permanent on the walls as it is in the human soul. You come into this world with a direct link to the divine. So you don't need an intermediary. So what I want to say is, the next time you hear the story of al-Hallaj and you hear words like the heretic, well, let's just remember this. Remember the pyramid texts. Remember the coffin texts. Remember the first Sufi. Remember Jew al-Nun al-Misri. Remember Insut Biti Aknaten and the hymn to the Aten. Because they all say Inik Maat, Inik Ausar, Inik Heru. I am the truth. Remember that Ana al-Haqq is the cousin of Inik Ausar. It's not just history. It's personal, divine, spiritual reclamation. It's understanding that the deepest currents of our spiritual thoughts have African roots. Now, if this resonates with you, if you're putting up what I'm putting down, if it makes you look at history a little bit differently, if it piques your curiosity, do me a favor. Hit the like button. Let's see, where is the... Hit the like button. Let me see. I'm trying to get to something real quick. A little bit. Hit the like button, ladies and gentlemen. Share this channel. Share this video with somebody else. Share it with a friend and tell a friend to tell a friend. Drop a comment down below. You can say something in the chat while we live. You can say something on the page after we live. Drop a comment. Tell me if you see the connection, or if you think I'm just up here being blasphemous. But be specific. Let's keep the knowledge circulating. Let's keep the conversation going. This is your brother Shabazz. This is the proper perspective. And with that, if we don't have any conversation. Okay, shout out to Courtney D70. Courtney says, I just subscribed to your interesting platform. Thank you. Appreciate that. I really do appreciate that. So that's what it's about. I hope I am piquing curiosity and interest. What we do on this channel, we cover a whole lot of topics, but Islam is in the mix. African spirituality is in the mix. I also cover current affairs, politics, and the whole nine. At least I try to anyhow. But again, this is your brother Shabazz. This is the proper perspective. Like, share, and subscribe is the name of the game. It keeps the algorithm jumping and it keeps everything moving in the right direction. So I'm about to break up out of here. Oh Lord, okay, let me see. All right, hold on. I can stick around. I'm a Texas Freemason, but I love to know where I come from. That's what's up, Courtney. As long as you love to know where you come from. Because most of the ideas that do circulate today can all be traced back to, like they say, there's nothing new under the sun. That's not just an expression. That's a very hardcore, realistic, radical truth. And when you start putting the puzzle pieces together, everything goes back to Africa. Let's see. So shout out to user JB8. Says, looking forward to more content, bro. I'm watching through some of your older work. I do appreciate that. You don't know how much I appreciate that. For real, for real. Like I said, I do cover a lot of different things. Drop comments on whatever, any videos that you want. Like I said, like, share, and subscribe is the name of the game. Tell a friend and tell a friend. I'm trying to get my numbers up, trying to get the subs up. I cover a lot of different things depending on what's going on. So I have a couple of series, and this is about, you know, Islam and the black hands of the black fingerprints, the sources of Islam. Hey, absolutely, we're locked in. Thank you for having me. Wonderful platform. Again, appreciate you, Courtney. Let's see. So like I said, you know, I'm getting ready to get up out of here. I'm going to say it one more time and then we're going to jump. Like, share, and subscribe is the name of the game. Drop a comment below. Let me see something. Tell me that you see any other connections or you don't see the connections. If you think I'm up here blaspheming, then let me know. This is your brother Shabazz. This is the Proper Perspective. Stay conscious, everybody. Assalamu alaikum. Hotep to the Pan-African pro-black world and anybody else that knows that they need to look beyond the scope of miracles. With that, I'm going to stay peace.